So, I want to talk to you about something very specific today. It's regarding the construction of specifically human consciousness as a product of natural consciousness, which is a sort of visionary split. And the way it's a visionary split is through an inversion, is that natural consciousness constructs itself absolutely. And human consciousness is a reflection upon that absolution. It is the experience of the body that constitutes the existential tension of the incompatible conflict between consciousness and witnessing and the linguistic modifier of the body in space and time, which is to say, the human being experience is navigating the forces itself proper. It is the human being is itself the will, navigating the will as an awakening and awareness to and of the physics of the human experience, the absolute interdimensional synthetic science of the human experience, entropy, gravity, and the genetics of the birth of the form of the human being as a linguistic modifier, the human being itself as a word or the word. This again returns us to the concept of the divine logos or God. So, the way that I was going to frame this is around the title Visionary Subjectivities and introduce two Basquiat drawings. Themselves, the drawings often I find more fascinating than the paintings, specifically because of their illustrative and straightforward quality, the unadorned depictions of the experience of the human body projected through the symbolic linguistic modifier formal representation of the body. The body is reprojected out into space, into time, two-dimensionally upon the piece of paper in reference to the expansive interdimensional, three-dimensional procedure of the human body moving through space and moving through time. So the metaphor to me, Basquiat himself as a subjective experimentory, is I kind of envision it symbolically as, of course, the cross, which is the vertical and the horizontal dimensions. And then the outstretched hand reaching through it, which is the human experience, or the Adamic, as in Adam, in the Michelangelo creation painting. The outstretched hand through it, the Adamic dimension, which is the human dimension, which is the experiential, embodied dimension of spirit and time, or spirit and form, moving through time. Passage by dimensional expansion through the vertical and horizontal planes, as in gravity, into the process of the negotiation of gravity in space and time, as in movement of the will in the field. And this, of course, returns us to athletics as an attunement of the will to physical conditions and physics proper, an embodied gnosis, which is to say, the experience of that which is stitched together. I was going to use the metaphor of Frankenstein as nature here, that which is stitched together by the absolute process of the construction of the unconscious will becoming conscious through its experience of the construction in space and in time. Again, the embodied experience of the engine waveform in space as thermonuclear inhabitant, as quite literally a linguistic modifier, as in a spoken word, as itself space and spatial dynamics, the negotiation of the warbling engine outside compressing space on the street. And this is Basquiat. Because we in the human experience are moving through a time tunnel, which is the construction of space-time as the real field of negotiation of these forces. Again, the physics of the human experience, entropy, gravity, and genetics, as in the construction of the birth of the form, as in a field status, an ecosystem, in which the body lapses in upon itself, as in a compression of time or a folding back in of time upon itself, which we understand to be the experience of the whole gravitationally. The pull back into the abyss of the body and the constitution of a visionary subjectivity out from under it. Again, this is the idea that the kingdom of heaven is within you. This is the idea of the revelation in the literal embodied experience, which itself is transcendental and beyond words and beyond language, because through the linguistic modifier, the force which constructs all linguistic modifiers, as in the field of space-time itself, which is the perennial gravitational negotiational relationships between bodies. The implicit and explicit perception by going down and into the form, which itself, the form is the construction through which the visionary subjectivity emerges by reflecting back upon the body proper. This is the intersection between poetics and physics, if you understand this. Theoretical physics and poetics. Because this is a reflection back upon the body proper. It's just a failure to metabolize the total field dynamics therein. And so when Basquiat directly reflects, as in a painting or his paintings or his drawings, which consistently and persistently at their best are primarily, fundamentally, and even solely reflections back upon the symbolic nature of the body, as in the experience of the body, which is transcendental of the anatomy. And so I need you to blast this outward, macrocosmically, in a cosmological sense, when Newton asks the question, who constructs gravity? This is the same question Basquiat asks. Who constructs human consciousness? And so he has the painting, which will be included at the top here, of the sort of twisted ape with the moment of terror and horror reflecting back upon and through its construction. And Basquiat is mirroring that image representationally upon the piece of paper. The body has left the plane of stellarity, and has entered into true stellarity and true celerity, which is the visionary awakening of consciousness up through the genetic form and the forces which ground it, twist it, malign it through history. And so this is what we mean by awakening in a cosmological sense. When the much of the misguided modern physics takes the formula to be the truth. But the formula is just the action of the negotiation of the process. We're looking at the essential character behind the action, and the action can tell us about the character, right? And this is the incorporative quality of metaphysics, which aligns the nuclear physicist or the theoretical physicist with the poet, or the one who explores the depths of the psyche, which in this case would be Basquiat. And so when we talk about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and again I want to connect this with the human experience as a cosmological process, a stellar forge and a stellar field, which is itself the totality, is that what she is depicting in Frankenstein and the creation of the monster in Frankenstein is literally the process of nature becoming aware of itself, the literal recombinatory process, elementally, chemically, genetically, of creating this form which itself is the spark of awareness, which again, down through time and down through ancestral history, genetic history, there is this awakening of the ape, which itself is a plant or a tree or flower which is grown and fatted in the thermonuclear metropolis of Earth and the larger empire of the solar system. You could say the kingdom of the civilization as a field. And then, of course, the larger interstellar field of the universe itself. We're looking at the authentic encounter of nature through the spark of the mind, which is synaptic. The forebrain synaptic reflective refractive encounter, which is true in the sense that it is embodied and as such is negotiating the will within the will which has awakened to the will as a primordial condition, and the primordial embodied ecological terror of that revelation in the sense that it is occurring through itself unto itself and is immediate, and as such cannot be negotiated outwardly symbolically, although that attempt constitutes much of, if not all of, human history. Again, if you understand this, that the visionary state is a total inhabitance of that principle. It's not a refraction or reflection of that principle into a cosmos or into a symbol or into a linguistic, wherein the linguistic modifier itself as a natural form and as the construct of nature. So understand the linguistic modifier as both space-time and the genetic form of the human being. They're inseparable. This is, again, the interstellar union of cosmos and psyche through the thermonuclear scalar, which is to say, in the human form, the metabolism. We're talking about the same metacosmological process, the same metaformal linguistic, the same metaformal language which is being translated down through scales, as we've discussed. The experience of that is total in the embodied incarnate human being, and thus the revelation of that is the primordial terror depicted in Basquiat's ape reflecting in upon itself, and being depicted truly through the visionary subjectivity of Basquiat, which renders the being, the body, and the form as a primordial transhistorical terror of revelation, of that which is enlightened to or becoming aware of itself as a grand cosmological process, and yet grounded in a formal half-life entropic animal organism. And you can see this reduced even further in the gold-framed black outline drawing of a total emptied presence. A sort of ghastly constructed, again, Frankensteinian appearance of being, which itself in this second image is entirely non-reflective. And this would stand for the reconciled hypermechanical sort of quantum deterministic principle of nature, which is itself revelated in the first. And this is made apparent in the eyes and the mouth, and also in the perspective upon which we view the revelation from outside. This is very similar to Munch's The Scream, for instance, because, again, we're looking at the existential condition of this interdimensional gravity, which has been and is itself a deep time historical snowball of movements, elemental and chemical recombining, a synthetic process of a nature which is, again, with Kierkegaard, redoubled upon itself in the revelation, which threatens the return of something far more primordial than the phenomenological or the Newtonian physics, which, again, as we discussed, is the entrancement of the quantum mechanical. Because it is the repetition without awareness the repetition without witness. And this is what's so fascinating about the story of Job in the Bible, is that what this describes is a reckoning with the quantum mechanical field out from under the Newtonian hypnosis of space-time. The abolition of the form through the revelation of the form. And the revelation of the form comes about through the embodiment of it. Again, right? The negotiation of space-time as fields of gravitation. And the gravitational descent itself of the linguistic modifier of humanity down through the large-scale trans-special genetic code, which gives birth to the modern iteration of the human being, which again is the experience beyond the conscious creative construction of the sex drive, the lungs, the heart, the brain. This is an inheritance, right? This is deeply Newtonian. This is an inheritance, a phenomenological inheritance of a template of being through which being is becoming conscious of itself vis-a-vis the navigation of these forces, which is the essential athletics of history. That human history itself is the story of a progressive attunement of the will to physical conditions, and these physical conditions being incarnate primarily, and then negotiated out in the realm of a relative gravitation, and having to negotiate the linguistic modifier of the digestive system. The thermonuclear metabolism inherited from star systems. This essential process which has been translated and is lived out actively, consciously or unconsciously, unto the awakening of the visionary subjectivity, which has the moment of the sublime encounter, of the totality, up and out through space-time, into the revelation of creative being and all that which has descended and transcended down through it into this process of active embodied gnosis, which is the human experience. And this, in many ways, again, is an abolition. It is the direct encounter, which is the abolitive encounter of the previous paradigm of the historical unconscious, the entirety of nature and the natural process, which is a lapsing in, a breaking in, and a breaking down in, as in whole dynamics, space-time whole dynamics, a lapse of the form. The opening up beneath the form of the supra-historical abyss, which is conscious revelation, the moment of awareness, which breaks in and through the historical language of the genetic body, in and through the historical language of Newtonian physics, which is the formal field of being. And this is by the process of the will's incompatible conflict and negotiation between the witness which cannot reconcile itself with the linguistic modifier which itself is temporal. Because the witness understands in an a priori way. This is not a knowing, it is an awareness of itself being as the total field of being, and is attempting to reconcile itself with this half-life modifier, which produces the Basquiat moment of awareness of the visionary subjectivity as discussed, compression of space on the street in regards to the warbling engine, which is the impossible relativity Again, right, if you understand this in a quantum mechanical sense, this is the impossible relativity, which is the seat of the thermodynamic, thermonuclear revelation in and through itself into and unto the quantum mechanical, which itself seems impossibly incompatible with the everyday because in a very profoundly true sense it is. Again, to understand this in relationship to the entire arc of what has just been constituted in this oration. So that's what I got. Pretty cool stuff. I'll catch you on the next one.